Comes from Peter in Germany. Some months ago, you said that Russia was too civilized to use cluster munitions, but I now keep seeing reports of heavy use of RBK 500 bombs. Is Russia getting desperate after all?
Yeah, there's a lot of desperation going on, Peter. Russia's really desperate. They're losing this war, and they're not losing, are they? No, they're winning. You see, there's consequences for actions, Peter. Russia is a civilized nation, and Russia said that we won't be the first to use cluster munitions. In fact, Russia wasn't using cluster munitions, but Russia said there will be consequences if Ukraine uses cluster munitions. The United States provided Ukraine with a significant number of cluster munitions, which have been used on Russian soldiers. Peter, have you ever been to war? Do you know what a cluster munition is? Have you ever been under the direct fire from cluster munitions? Do you realize the casualties that it carries out? The Russians have been dying under these cluster munitions. And guess what? Russia said enough is enough. They have employed better cluster munitions, and they're slaughtering the Ukrainians, butchering them, taking them out. Ukraine brought it upon themselves. NATO brought it upon Ukraine by giving them these weapons to begin with. Had they not introduced cluster munitions, this wouldn't be happening. But this isn't an act of desperation on the part of Russia. It's an act of retaliation for the initiation of the employment of cluster munitions by Ukraine. And the munitions they're using, they come from Germany of some places. Think about that, Peter. You guys did it. You're responsible. You made it happen. So do my people, the Americans. No, I'm not sympathetic to any German out there.
No, I understand.
I'm not here to,
That was a nice little added detail that you threw in there. I wasn't live on YouTube. Russian Ballet is watching us on YouTube. He says, what do you think of Finland closing borders with Russia?
Why? I mean, I know what they're saying. That the Russians are somehow facilitating, unregistered immigrants across as a form of hybrid warfare to flood Finland with. Look, Finland right now is just playing a stupid game, and when you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. They're trying to look resolute in the face of Russia. They're trying to not be seen as backing down from Russia. And all they're doing is bankrupting themselves. Somebody didn't do the accounting on this one. This is one of those really, stupid moves where you take a look at it and they shut the border and you're going, you guys do know you lost a couple $2 billion worth of trade there. Russia ain't suffering. It's inconvenient for some Russians. Look, Helsinki's there. A lot of Russians like to go to Helsinki. A lot of Russians like to go to Finland. They've been doing it for decades. There's relationships. And so, this can be an irritation to Russians, but you're not hurting Russia. You're hurting Finland, and you're just embarrassing yourselves. The Finns are pathetic. They really are very pathetic. And soon they're going to find out what reality is. Russia has built put together a new military district that's right there. Next to St. Petersburg. It's going to have 70,000 troops whose sole job in life is to kill Finnish soldiers. And the Russians are really good at killing people. They've proven that now in Ukraine. They're better at it than the Ukrainians are. They're better at it than NATO are. They're better at it than anybody in the world. They've developed new tactics, new technologies, new operational methodologies. They're the strongest military in the world, and Finland just pissed them off, and they're not going to have 70,000. Their sole job is to train to kill Finns. So congratulations, Finland. Keep it up. Maybe you'll get the war you desperately seem to want.
Timochenko in Halifax, Canada. Can you give us an overview of international weapons treaties that are no longer functioning, and who, in your opinion, is to blame?
Well, we'll start with who, in my opinion, is to blame. It's the United States of America, 100%. Scott, how can you say that? I don't know. Let's see. We withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. That was the foundational treaty for modern arms control. It basically created the reality that you can't win a nuclear war, so why try to defend against a nuclear war? It created the notion of mutually assured destruction, that if we fire missiles against you, there will be no defense, so our missiles will kill you. But if you fire your missiles in retaliation, we have no defense, your missiles kill us. Therefore, let's not fire missiles at each other. And if we're building missiles that we don't want to fire at each other, why don't we sit down and have arms control talks? So the ABM Treaty set the conditions for the strategic arms limitation talks, which set the conditions for the strategic arms reduction talks, which created the potential for the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. And now we're talking about reducing nuclear arsenals from, 30,000, 20,000 down to, 5,700 each. That's a big reduction. That's what arms control treaties did. But then the United States said, oh, well, we don't like this, you see, because we're not about parity. We're not about, mutual security. We're about American hegemony. We want arms control treaties to basically empower us. And now that Russia is weak, now that the Soviet Union has gone away, we find these treaties inconvenient because they're holding us back. So we withdrew from the ABM treaty so we could build a missile defense system because we never thought the Russians would object. Then we turned around and we withdrew from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. But before we did that, we also went out of our way to make sure that the strategic arms reduction treaties that had been signed and ratified never were implemented because we had no interest in implementing them. We didn't want to implement them because why? We have the supremacy. We have the superiority. Anatoly Antonov is the Russian ambassador to the United States. He was also a former deputy minister of defense, and he was the chief arms control negotiator. He negotiated the only remaining treaty between the United States and Russia for arms control, and that's the New START Treaty in 2010. When that negotiation began in 2009, he told the Obama administration, hey, we need to incorporate missile defense. This whole thing you did with pulling out of the ABM treaty and then deploying these missile defense systems in Romania and Poland, it ain't cool. We don't like it. And we're not happy about further reducing our strategic arsenal as long as you have these missile defense systems in place. They're interlinked. And Obama said, I can't have that conversation with you right now because the Senate will never ratify that. We're going to split them up. Trust me, he said, trust me. We're going to split them up. We're going to negotiate the arms control aspect of it. And then when I get that through the Senate, then we will negotiate in good faith on the missile defense thing. And Antonov was like, nope, I don't want to do that. I think that's stupid. But his bosses, Medvedev at that time, said, yeah, we'll do that. I trust Obama. He's a good guy. So they negotiated that treaty and it got ratified and it's in. And Antonov starts calling people. Hey, remember that ballistic missile thing? We're ready. Our boys are in Geneva. You're not coming to Geneva, are you? Are you delayed? Oh, you're not going to do it at all, are you? You lied to me. And that's the bottom line, is we lied. Why would the Russians ever again enter a treaty relationship with the United States? They're going to let New START die. And there's no rush. In fact, Russia said, we're not going to revive any of the Cold War treaties. We're done with that legacy. We're tired of negotiating with an American partner that isn't a partner. They lie, they cheat, they steal. They don't negotiate in good faith. We are done with this. If you want to have something that's going to be totally new, no more concepts of Russia sucking up to America, Russia doing this, Russia doing that, Russia making concessions. People know that the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, the Russians destroyed far more systems than we did. And to sweeten the pot, the Russians threw in the SS-23 short-range missile just because the Americans thought that would be cool too. The Russians are done playing that game. They have built a new generation of nuclear weapons. The Sarmat heavy ICBM, the Yars, which is a very accurate road mobile and silo-based ICBM, the Bulava missile fired out of submarines, the Avant-Garde hypersonic maneuvering warhead. None of this stuff can be shut down by any of those missile defense systems that we put up. So Russia has nullified that. So pulling out of the ABM treaty was the dumbest thing we ever did, because now what Russia has done is put systems in place that make our missile defense use, and we spent almost $1 trillion on missile defense. It's all gone, ladies and gentlemen. $1 trillion. You know what we could have done with $1 trillion? I know what I could have done. It would have been one hell of a bet at Vegas. But yeah, but my point is, my God, $1 trillion. You could literally solve all the problems in America for the money we wasted on missile defense, because it's all gone, ladies and gentlemen. None of it works anymore. Can't shoot down a Russian missile. Won't happen. They will take us out. And not only that, they're in the position where they can take us out preemptively if they want to. They can fire that Sarmat missile, and it comes through the South Pole where we can't detect it. And then it releases their avant-garde hypersonic maneuvering warheads that we can't shoot down. And if they blanket America with, say, a couple hundred of them, it's over. It's over. So America now is saying, oh, we have to build up. We have to, because we got the Minuteman III that dates back to the late 1960s. They just did one of their regular test fires of the Minuteman III. It had to be blown up in the air because it didn't work, because it's an old missile. So we're going to build a new one, the Sentinel. It's going to be deployed sometime in 2034 if it passes its flight test, which is a big if, because our military industrial complex doesn't seem to work too well lately. It's all about making money, not making good weapons. But we're going to spend a lot of money on that. Some people talk in the range of 200, 300 billion. I can guarantee, and let's bet on it right now, that the final price tag for our strategic nuclear modernization is going to top out at over $1.6 trillion, because that's what it's going to cost us to get a new missile, get new submarines, get a new bomber, to reactivate this. Russia warned us about this. In 2018, Vladimir Putin gave a speech where he introduced all these weapons. He said, we asked you not to get out of the ABM treaty. We asked you not to do this, that, and the other thing. You didn't listen to us. So let me introduce you to our... It's like Scarface. Let me introduce you to my good friend, Sarmat, Yars, this, that, the other thing. And then he said, are you listening now? Well, I don't think we are, but we should be. Someday we're going to have to sit down with the Russians and come to grips with this nuclear arsenal, or we're all going to die. There will be a nuclear war. But I think we're going to have, we have to learn to start from scratch. We flipped the roles. It used to be that the Russians would want to have arms control with America because we had some superiority or things that I think we now need it. And the Russians aren't going to play that game. They're going to maintain their superiority. They're not going to concede their superiority. They're not going to give up the weapons that make them invincible from a nuclear standpoint. And we're going to have to learn to live with that and just try and control it, understanding that we will never again be in a position where we can go to bed at night feeling comfortable that nothing bad can happen, because the Russians now have the weaponry that can make very bad things happen anytime they want to, and it's our fault.
Willie Bond 0007 is watching us on YouTube. The question from him, I guess, why isn't the Red Sea real estate of the Sinai utilized? I think that's what he meant to say. Is the Red Sea that polluted from the shipping?
My understanding is that the Egyptians have quite a bit of tourist, facilities on the Sinai, on the Red Sea. There's a lot of diving, a lot of water. There was some terrorist acts against these places, but the Israelis used to go to the Sinai quite a bit as a vacation spot. So I don't understand the question. I'd have to read up on what you're talking about, because either I'm dead wrong about there being a big tourist industry in the Red Sea, or you're dead wrong about there being heavy pollution from shipping.
All right, let's move on to our next question from Philip in Switzerland. If genocide is accepted in Western society, extremists like Nazis are promoted, and the truth no longer matters, are there still limits for these people? And if we do not resist, what will our future look like in 10 or 100 years? Will BRICS Plus save us all?
Well, let's start with what our future will look like in 100 years if all this continues as you say. Have you ever driven around to go, and you can see it here if you drive up into rural New York, you can go by the homestead that was abandoned 100 years ago. It's hard to see because Mother Nature's come in and the trees have grown up and the roots go through the house and the house collapses and crumbles and the shrubs and the brush are there and there's animal and wildlife there. That's what the world's going to look like in 100 years when we're all dead. Mother Nature's is going to cleanse itself. The plants are going to grow. Cockroaches will morph into something because mammals will be all dead. So maybe we'll be eventually we'll be a planet populated by the bugs out of Men in Black. Who knows? But that's where we're heading. We're all going to die. There will be a nuclear war if we allow this kind of stuff to go on, because the mindset of genocide is a similar mindset to people who think you can win a nuclear war. That think that, guys, how do you win a nuclear war? How do you win a nuclear war? You terminate your opponent's ability to sustain itself as a civilization while retaining a modicum of civilization, left here. But when I say a modicum, I'm talking about very little bit. We're talking about, having a government that can speak to 4 or 5 cities and maybe have a couple rural areas where things can grow in some industrial base, but everybody else is dead, because that's what happens in a nuclear war. That's not victory. That's defeat. That's absolute defeat. Yeah, tube worms, man. They'll become the new. And you know what? They'll do a better job than we're doing. Tube worms, I bet you, would do a better job. Cockroaches would do a better job in managing the planet than we're doing. We're destroying this place. It's just ridiculous what's going on. But no, you're right. We need to start respecting human life. We need to start respecting human life, and we don't. We are intolerant of people who are different from us. I don't know how many times I hear people talk about, how many nukes will it take to destroy the earth? 1. Yeah, because it's the first one you fire. It triggers all the rest. But if we don't start respecting human life, we don't start respecting, other people's right to exist, then it's all over, because what goes around comes around. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And if we disrespect human life, don't be surprised when humanity disrespects our life and we end up killing each other.
Mike Raffone in Finland. Finland's military and government officials are well aware of the situation in Ukraine, and yet still they are constantly picking a fight with Russia. What's behind all this relentless bear poking?
Well, my understanding is that that Finland joined NATO without a referendum, that the Finnish people didn't get the referendum they were promised. I mean, somebody can correct me on that one, but I think that's the case, meaning that the Finnish government unilaterally decided they were going to do this act of insanity, and the Finnish people weren't consulted. Now that they've done it, I mean, it's looking pretty stupid. I mean, they decided to join when it looked easy. Russia's getting beat. Russia's going down. Let's join NATO. Let's do a dance on the Russians' grave. Maybe if we join NATO, that'll be part of the overall effect that brings down Putin, because that's what NATO wanted. They wanted a Moscow Maidan. They wanted the Russian people to rise up and get rid of Putin, because it was hopeless for Russia. Their economy was going to collapse. They weren't winning in the military, and the people were just unhappy. So they would rise up. And so the Finns jumped on the bandwagon when they were sold that bill of goods. And suddenly the Finns are looking around going, Putin's sort of more popular than he's ever been. Russia's stronger than it's ever been. Their economy is doing wonderful considering the sanctions. Their military is kicking some serious ass, and we're in a lot of trouble. Therefore, do we want to admit we were wrong? That's a tough thing to do, especially when you never ask permission to do it anyways. It'd be one thing if you said, well, hey, guys, you're the ones that said you wanted to join NATO, but they just did it without the people. Now the people are going, why did we do this again? What's the benefit for this for us? So in order to justify joining NATO, they have to do things that make Russia look like the threat. And so that's what they're doing right now. They're just trying to make Russia look like a threat in the public eye in Finland.
Math, Fun, and Games watching on YouTube asks, what do you think of Argentina making the decision to not join BRICS?
Well, I mean, it's a sovereign state. They elected a president who has a vision, and the fact that he was elected democratically means that the Argentinian people support this vision, and that vision is one that would align Argentina more closely with the United States and the United States economic model. He wants to dump the peso and bring in the dollar and make the dollar the currency of Argentina. This is a reversal of the direction Argentina was going, where they were jumping on the multipolar bandwagon, improving relations with China, with Russia. They were going to join BRICS, but that's over. It's a bold move on his part. That's my way of saying that this man's dumber than dirt, and it's that he's going to fail. I mean, I hope for the Argentinian people I'm wrong. I wish them all to have a very prosperous life with a sound economy, but that ain't going to happen. That's not the trajectory that the world's going on. Just because you have some dude that has, lamb chop muttons and can hold up a chainsaw and dance around and, very erotically, that doesn't mean that all those things that, make people cheer and do the tango, turn you into a leader of, with the capability of doing this. History has made its vote. History is voting towards multipolarity. BRICS is the epitome of a multipolar institution. This is a fatal mistake by Argentina, and I think Argentina is going to pay a very, very heavy price going forward.
Mark Kessler is watching on Facebook. Is Russia now committed to taking real estate from Kherson, Odessa to Transnistria?
Yeah, that's. I'm writing an article right now. Just basically the working title of it is "Bye Bye Odessa." I think the fate of Odessa was sealed recently when Zelensky and his government bragged about how they drove the Russian fleet, the Black Sea fleet, from Sevastopol. And because the majority of the heavy warships of the Black Sea fleet did leave Sevastopol and go to Russian ports on the Black Sea coast. Why? Because it was untenable. You had these waterborne drones. You had other drones coming in. And for the Ukrainians, they can fire 100 of these things. If one gets through, that's a sunk ship. That's a damaged ship. That's not the way the Russians want to play ball. Plus, now they basically have started carrying out these indiscriminate drone attacks against civilian targets in Odessa. It's basically kind of terrorism that they did against Donetsk for a number of years. They're now doing in Crimea. And so what you're telling the Russians is that there will be no peace in Crimea so long as Ukraine controls Odessa. And I think that this sealed the fate of Odessa. I think the Russians now understand that no matter what, how this war ends, the bottom line is if Ukraine controls Odessa, Crimea will never be safe. And so in order to guarantee the security of Crimea, you have to take Odessa. You have to take the Black Sea. You have to cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea. And once you make that decision, then you have to link up with Transnistria and make it, the continuity across. And this means that you're going to have to take Kherson, all of it. You're going to have to take Nikolaev. You're going to have to take Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkov, Sumy, Chernihiv. The Russians said a while ago, if Ukraine wants to continue this war, they're going to lose 5 more oblasts. I think I just named the 5 they're going to lose. So it's a decision the Ukrainians made. They brought it upon themselves. And just keep this in mind now that the head Ukrainian negotiators have come out and admitted that this war could have ended on 1 April had Ukraine simply signed the treaty that had been negotiated. And when you listen to the treaty, he says, and Arestovich has said this too, and others have said, when you look at the text, it was almost like we were dictating the terms of conflict termination with the Russians. The Russians were giving us so many concessions. Concessions we weren't demanding, by the way. The Russians were putting it on the table because Russia apparently wanted peace. Imagine that. Vladimir Putin, the world's greatest warmonger, really wanted peace and was willing to make tremendous concessions to the Ukrainians to achieve peace. All they had to do is say, we're not joining NATO. That's it. Well,